How's it going, everyone? Nick Templin here from Templin Scouting, and I know it's been a little while since I've last uploaded. I've been meaning to get a couple of mock drafts out this season, but this one will be my first official one of the year that will be going up on YouTube. So this one is being made, the date is February 7th, 2024. Should hopefully get that uploaded, either tomorrow or the day after. Just want to kind of get my draft content rolling as we kind of get towards the trade deadline here. Obviously, I'll be making a few more as things change, but this one will be for the based on the standings as of today. And with no lottery involved, so just based on entirely the exact standings as they are right now. So, just going to open it up, start it out. No surprise here, it's going to be Macklin Celebrini going first overall to the Blackhawks. And I do want to mention as well, before we get rolling too much, this isn't my personal rankings. This is more of a what I expect to happen, or if the draft were to happen tomorrow, where I think the players actually would end up, rather than my own personal actual opinion. But I do have a little bit of that sprinkled in here and there. So if you guys want me to make another video, I have my rankings in Excel this year. So I might make another video talking about my top 50 players or something. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, please let me know by liking this video and commenting, and I will try and get that out to you guys as well. But starting it off pretty simple here, Macklin Celebrini, as much as I've wanted to be kind of different and talk about maybe somebody else going first overall this year, I don't expect anybody else to go first overall, and I don't think that Chicago will worry about drafting another potential center here, despite the fact that they've gone with Bedard and Oliver Moore were their 2 first-round picks last year. I think Celebrini can play the wing, and I think worst-case scenario, if you have Bedard as your 1 center, Celebrini as your 2, and Oliver Moore as your 3rd center, I think you're pretty happy with that. So I think overall, if this is the situation that ends up happening for the Blackhawks, I think they're pretty happy with being able to select Macklin Celebrini. I think what's so special about him is he's a really impressive skater. I think that's really the best part of his game. He's really fast. The one knock I have on him, and I don't know if it's necessarily a popular opinion, but I think that his skating speed is a little bit faster than his hands. His hands can't keep up with the speed of his feet right now, but I think he has a lot of skill and talent that I think it will catch up. He's a great shooter, great passer, just overall just a very interesting, well-rounded player. I don't think he's going to be a superstar in the league previous first overall picks have been, but I think he's a really talented guy who is immediately going to jump into the NHL and make his team better. And I think he would complement the play style of Bedard really well, so I think overall it's a really good potential thing that could happen for the Blackhawks if they do end up winning the lottery this year. The 2nd overall pick, I have Caden Lindstrom, who has really shot up everyone's draft boards this year. At times, I thought I had him too high when I had him at top 10. Now people are pretty much convinced having him top 5, and I am as well. He is my actual number 2 player in the draft. Now, I could see a number of things happening here. I mean, the Sharks definitely need defensive prospects as well, so I could see them going with a defenseman here. There's not really, in my personal opinion, a defenseman I like enough to take 2nd overall, and a lot of the top defensemen, I definitely, most people's top defensemen, I definitely don't like enough for 2nd overall, but I like Caden Lindstrom a lot. I think that, he's got some versatility. He can play center or the wing. I think he will end up being a center in the NHL. He's a guy with a big frame, but he skates extremely well. He's got really deceptive skating moves. Essentially he can his edges are really good. He will often cut one way, fake one way kind of, and cut the other way and really fool defenders. And he's playing on a really loaded, talented Medicine Hat team right now, who I've tried to catch a fair bit of recently because I just love the talent that they have there. Interestingly, they run a 5-forward power play sometimes, I've noticed, and with him and Gavin McKenna and Andrew Basha and Oishis Weisblatt, and it's a really talented group, and he is absolutely the star of that team right now. Obviously, McKenna is going to be a superstar in the league as well. I think Caden Lindstrom really does have the highest ceiling in this draft, because he can really do it all. He defends well, he skates well, he's really smart with the puck, he's really smart without it. He can be physical, he's just everything you want in an NHL player, and I think he's going to really excel when he gets this to the next level. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he needs another year to develop. I don't think that should scare teams away from drafting him second overall. I think that you draft him second overall and you be really smart with his development, because I think the sky's really the limit for him. I think he could end up being the best player from this draft. With the third overall pick, I have the Anaheim Ducks selecting Anton Saleyev, and Saleyev's a really unique prospect. He's another guy who before the start of this year a lot of people didn't know about, and it's mainly because the stats didn't jump out to you as an MHL player. He was certainly not an offensive force by any means, and he still isn't. But I think what's really impressive about Saleyev, and what's really unprecedented about him, is how many games he's played in the KHL and how much ice time he gets as a draft eligible player, which is just something that doesn't happen a whole lot. But I've tried to watch him a fair bit here, and what I will say about him is he is built to be the perfect shutdown defender. Like, I've watched a decent amount of film on him, and he doesn't make a lot of mistakes defensively. He is really good at winning pucks, whether it be with his long reach, which he uses really well, but he also closes people out along the boards with his body very well. He has this really interesting technique that I've noticed where he kind of turns his stick over and almost uses it like a kind of like if you were to play ringette with a hockey stick. He kind of holds his stick like that when he doesn't have the puck, which is really interesting. I think I'll have to learn more and find out kind of why that is being done. I wonder if that's being taught these days, or what the trend on that might be. But it is really interesting and seems to be really effective for him. He cuts off passing lanes really well. The one thing that I think might hold him back from being the top defenseman in this draft, and is just that he doesn't have a lot of offensive ability. He doesn't like to hold the puck very much. Whenever he gets the puck, he likes to quickly move it to a teammate, which I love. I think it's great. I think he is a guy who is going to be completely unproblematic as far as his play. You're never going to worry about having him on the ice. The thing is, he's just not going to bring you a lot of flash. He's not going to bring you a lot of his skating is good, but he's not going to be taking pucks on end-to-end rushes. He's not going to be the guy quarterbacking a power play. I do think he has a pretty good shot, which is one pretty good offensive quality. And I think he's smart in the offensive zone. Like, if he gets the puck, he's going to make a good play with it. He's either going to quickly get a pass to an open guy, or he's going to just throw the puck on net. But he's not going to do anything dynamic for you like some of the other defensemen in this draft. So it really comes down to fit. And I think that when you look at Anaheim and the players that they're developing, they have a lot of really good offensive defenseman prospects in their system right now, with guys like Pavel Minchikov. They got Tristan Luneau, who plays a really good two-way game, and then they've got Olin Zellweger, who's a very primarily offensive focused and kind of on the smaller side kind of defenseman. So I think if you bring in a guy like Anton Saleyev, it really complements those guys really well. I could also see Anaheim going with a forward at this point, because continue to build up that offensive top six, and potentially with Zegras on the move, just getting better wingers for whoever ends up being, your your top six. You'll have Cutter Gauthier, you'll have Leo Carlson, you'll have Mason McTavish will probably move to the wing primarily to keep all those guys in the top six, and then you got Troy Terry, and you've got a few other prospects that I've liked from the past few drafts that could eventually step in there, but you could also look at a guy like Ivan Demidov, or you could look at Cole Yzerman potentially. I think those are good options, and I'll talk about Cole Yzerman a bit because there's been a little bit of controversy surrounding his play once we get to him in a couple of picks here. But I do think that those are all possibilities for them as well. And like I said, if I was making this pick, I'm not sure if I would go Soleil this high, but I do like the fit for the Ducks, so I wouldn't be I wouldn't be too critical of it. And overall, I really do like the player. I think he's great. I think that maybe top 5 might just be a bit too rich for him. With the 4th overall pick, we've got the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I have them taking Ivan Demidov. He's kind of gone up and down the board with me a little bit. When he was hurt for a while, I didn't really know where to place him. So I started to kind of bring guys that I had been watching that were healthy and playing pretty well up, but once he came back and was dominating the MHL, I had to move him right back up. He's my 3rd overall best player in this draft, and I am definitely a big fan of his. I think early on I was a little bit worried about him just because he plays what I like to call hero hockey, where it looked like he was trying to kind of do everything himself, and often that was leading to turnovers as he was entering the offensive zone, and it's an issue that I notice with NHL players every now and again, and it's an issue that you see at every level with guys who are really talented that just haven't kind of put it all together. But he's kind of grown out of that as far as I can tell over the season, and I'm sure there will always be a little bit of that with him, but he has started making smarter plays with the puck, and I think that if he's playing at his absolute best, he also has a chance to be the best player in this draft. And I think, with Columbus, they're in an opportunity where they have a really good and deep prospect pool right now, where they get the opportunity to just come up and draft the best player available. They don't have to worry about needs at all. He's a guy who I think would fit really well with Fantilli. He would fit well with really any of the prospects that they're developing. It'll be interesting to kind of see what this team looks like over the next couple of years, just with some awkward contract situations, to see who they move on from, or who they're able to move on from, and how much of a youth movement this team kind of takes going forward. But I think Columbus is in an interesting spot in their rebuild, and I'm really interested to see what they do going forward. I don't think there's any chance they take a defenseman with this pick. I just love their defensive prospects too much right now, and there's a bit of a logjam with some of the veteran guys that they've signed long term. So I don't think that there's a need for any more defensive prospects here, and really the forwards are the best part of the early part of this draft. All right, we've got the 5th overall pick. It's the Ottawa Senators, and we have them taking Cole Yzerman. So Cole Yzerman, like I said earlier, has been falling down draft boards a fair bit. Coming into the year is going to be a 1A, 1B kind of battle between him and Macklin Celebrini, and to some degree I kind of held on to that for a lot longer than most people did. The main issue that people have with Cole Yzerman is they don't like that he hasn't developed more as a playmaker. He is a very shoot first kind of player. And for a while I was kind of fighting that, because I would see clips of him making these nice plays and passes every now and again, and sometimes making good passes that just weren't connecting. He is pretty significantly better than anybody else on the U.S. development team this year, other than James Haggins, who's not eligible until next season. And I think part of the reason why people have been less impressed with Yzerman too is because James Haggins has shined him this year as a younger player, and Haggins is going to be a great prospect and somebody I look forward to covering more next season. But I don't think that takes anything away too much from Cole Yzerman. I think as far as shooters in this draft, you're not going to find a better one. He has and his instincts for shooting are incredible. It's not even just the release or the power or any of that aspect of how he shoots. He will score goals from just about anywhere on the ice. There's a great clip of him from earlier in the season where he rips a puck top corner from behind the goal line, and the goalie is just absolutely baffled, confused how he got it in. And he's a really special player in that way. He's a great finisher. Like, he's going to be a guy who you put the puck on his stick in a good scoring opportunity, he's either going to score or create a juicy rebound that's going to lead to a goal, or more chances at the very least. I think he's a really talented player. I think that he could still go in the top three. I really do think that he has that playmaking ability still within him. It'll be interesting to see how he develops more as a college player. I've noticed a little bit over the last little bit that these guys that play at the U.S. For the U.S. under-18 team, you really only get a glimpse of what they're capable of there. You get to see their best skills shine because they really focus on those things, and then it's not really until they hit college that they start to become a more well-rounded player. People are worried about his back checking and stuff like that as well. I think as a winger, you can be a little bit less concerned with that. Obviously, it's still a factor, and I think it's still something that he can work on for sure. But, I looked to last year, and people were kind of ignoring that same red flag that was clear in Will Smith, and Will Smith still went in the top 5. So I think it's just one of those things that teams are going to be more willing to overlook because they believe that he's going to get there. And why do I see the fit with the Ottawa Senators? Well, I think they're a team that's in need of goal scoring. I think that they're probably going to move on from Tarasenko. I know there's talks that he likes being there. He doesn't want to move his no trade clause for the deadline, but I think they'll get to a point where Tarasenko maybe isn't a part of the big picture there, and I could be wrong. Either way, Yzerman can play on the left side, and right now the Sens are kind of looking for more left-handed wingers as well, because as of right now, Ridley Gregg is a top 6 forward for them, and I like Ridley Gregg a lot, and I think it's a role that he can definitely play, but I think the Sens are better if they have him on a really stacked third line, and I think Cole Yzerman makes a lot of sense to be a good second line winger or even a first line winger, depending on how they want to orient the whole thing. So I think this is the move they want to make. He can play either side, and I think Ottawa definitely is looking for right-handed forwards as well, because if they do move on from Tarasenko, they'll need another guy to fill in on that side, and you want eventually to figure out who you're going to replace Claude Giroux with, because unfortunately he's not getting any younger. So those are all kind of the reasons why I think if Cole Yzerman is available when the Sens pick, I'd be shocked if they let him go by. With the 6th overall pick, the Minnesota Wild select Sam Dickinson. So Sam Dickinson's an interesting one. He's definitely got a good two-way game. He's a good skater with the puck. He's a good playmaker with the puck. He can score goals as a defenseman, and I like his defense reasonably well. For me, he wouldn't be the next defenseman off the board, but I think if you're looking for a defenseman that could potentially play long-term with a Brock Faber, for example, which is what I think Minnesota will kind of be looking for here, I think that Dickinson and Faber can play pretty well together. They're both good skaters. Dickinson, I think, can hold up a bit better defensively, which will kind of help Faber excel in his more offensive game, which is good. And I think, just overall, I mean, you look at that defensive core in Minnesota, and it's kind of aging. You got guys like Goligoski and John Merrill, and, even Middleton for that matter. Really even Spurgeon and Brody, and everyone except for Faber in that defense is kind of getting up there. So it'll be good for them to kind of infuse a little bit of youth in there. Plus, I like the forward prospects that Minnesota has quite a bit. I know Minnesota has some other defensive prospects like Carson Lambos and I want to say O'Rourke. I feel like I'm getting that name wrong, but he was the Sioux defenseman that was pretty good defensively and everything. And yeah, there's a few other guys there that might be solid, but I think if you are trying to look to the first pairing kind of the future, then I think a Dickinson-Faber pairing could potentially be something that works out really well in Minnesota. Aside from that, Dickinson's got good size. I think right now I don't think he has a whole lot of a physical game, but I think that's something that he can kind of develop. I think he's a good player. I think there's other defensemen that I like more, that I think there's more of an upside, but he seems to be kind of the consensus, or at least close to the number 2 guy behind Saleyev for most people. And really, I don't disagree too heavily with that. I think he's a good player. With the 7th overall pick, the Buffalo Sabres select Zeev Buum. With this pick, I was having a bit of trouble. I mean, I wanted them to take a right-handed defenseman, because right now they got Dahlin, they've got Power, and they got Samuelsson, who are all left-handed defensemen. Now, I know Dahlin and Power can both play the right-hand side, so I know it's not a big deal. But when I looked at the options for right-handed defensemen, I didn't really see any that I liked that were both pretty good in a two-way sense. That would complement either Dahlin or Power's style of game. But I felt that Buum does. He's very good in both ends of his ice. Obviously, what's been really impressive about him this year is that he leads all defensemen in the NCAA as a freshman, which is very impressive. He's a great skater, great playmaker. He's a smart guy with the puck, and I like his play without the puck. So I think overall he does make a good fit. So I could see him playing, and I'd have to double check. Maybe he can play both sides as well, which would be nice. And I know that they like the chemistry that Samuelsson has with Dahlin, or at least they did at one point. I could be a bit outdated on that. They might not be kind of doing that anymore, but I know at one point that was definitely how things were working. And either way, they need another defenseman in the top 4. I do like some of the defensive prospects they've taken the past couple of years, but when you have the chance to take a guy like Buum, who I think really does have a I don't want to say high ceiling. I think he's just a guy who really can't fail, because he's really got a lot of the tools that are going to be needed. And I think he's still going to grow, because his older brother, is Shai Buum. He is, I think, 6'3" or 6'4", pretty tall, and like 230 pounds. So I think that's something that Buum can play at as well. And if he kind of becomes physical and kind of a better version of what they were hoping Connor Clifton would be for them, then I think that would work out really well. I don't think that the Sabres would use this pick on a forward, just because they have so many good forward prospects that they're waiting on. Like Kulik is going to be good. Isaac Rosen will probably be there soon. Obviously Savoie will be there soon. So yeah, just a lot of kind of a logjam right now with forward prospects, which is never a bad thing, and you could certainly add to that if you want to. But I think defense is maybe the area of that they can improve the most drastically through this draft. All right, so next we got Montreal. I wrote it in French. I could say it in French too, but I don't want to offend my my French listeners out there. I did take French for many years, but I've been told to speak English when I go to Quebec, and we'll just leave it at that. So we got the Montreal Canadiens selecting Constant Helenius. I think for Montreal, they're kind of in a situation where it's just kind of take the best forward possible. Not that I don't think they could still build up their defense, but I do notice their fan base online is kind of hoping that they don't take another defenseman with this pick. They feel that the core of guys that they have right now is going to be good enough as is, and I don't fully disagree with that. I do like... I love Reinbacher. I think that they've been kind of critical, kind of harsh on him, but I think you're going to get a really good two-way number one defenseman with him. And Caden Gooley's good. I think he's very solid. You've got a few other guys there who are already playing and playing reasonably well, and a few veterans who will probably stick around for a little while. So I don't think defense is too big of a need, and certainly they're hoping to get kind of more forwards in there. I do expect as well Montreal will make a move for Trevor Zegras at some point, so potentially if he can kind of bounce back with a change of scenery, I think that would work out as well. And Hellenius could play the center. I think that he'll likely be a winger at the next level, but he is good on face-offs, so that's always a plus even as a winger. He's a smart player. He does a lot of things right. He forechecks hard. His offense has been very good production this year in Liga. So he's one guy. He's not going to wow you with any one skill, but he really doesn't do anything wrong. So there's a number of guys that I think about for Montreal with this pick. There's another guy that we're going to be talking about soon that I have definitely considered when making this. And I'll kind of mention who that is when we get to him. But I think Hellenius has definitely got to be a top 10 guy here, and I think Montreal is a good fit. I think that he's a guy who can really play anywhere in your top 9. I think he has the ceiling of a first line player, and even at his worst, he's going to be a good third line player. So I think that Montreal fans would maybe wouldn't be super thrilled about the pick. I don't know. Maybe they want to go with higher offensive upside, but I think that Hellenius is a guy who is going to play well for you when you get to the playoffs. So that's just the kind of guy that I think he is. All right, with the 9th overall pick, we've got the Flames selecting Artyom Levshunov. The Flames are kind of going through a pseudo retooling. I won't call it a rebuild because they do have some contracts that they're going to be tied to for a while. So there's no use in just kind of selling everything else and starting over. It's just going to be more of a find the best players to build around them kind of thing. So I do think that there's going to be a fair bit of restructuring on their defense. It sounds like Chris Tanev and Noah Hanifin both won't be back next season. So I think going out and getting a defenseman, because I do like their forward prospects reasonably well right now. I think Coronado is going to take on more of a role next year, and I think Pelletier has a chance of taking on more of a role as well. And I loved their pickup of Hunter Brustevich, who I was very high on in last year's draft. I think I had him as my second or third best defenseman in the draft. I think second. Really, in my head, he was number 1. But I thought that would be too silly to put him over Reinbacher when nobody else had him in the first round. Anyways, I love that pickup for them. He's been amazing this year for Kitchener, and I think he's going to be a great player at the NHL level as well. I think some of his the concerns that scouts had with him were a bit overblown, and people are going to start to see that soon. But you get to add another guy here who's kind of more of a guaranteed NHL product here with Artyom Levshunov. You love the size, the skating's great, his offensive talents are very good. There is a bit of a concern with the defense. I think that you give him time. I think you don't pull him out of college right away. I think he gets another season there. You sit down with him before you draft him. You talk about the things that you want him to work on, and he seems like the guy who can get there for sure. Like his skating is great, and when the skating's good, I feel very confident that the rest of the defense game can follow, because really that's half of it. Overall, and he's been a highly touted guy for a while. He had a great season last year in the USHL. He's having a great offensive season this year at Michigan State. So I think in a way he's not going to become exactly a Noah Hanifin replacement, but in a way he will. Kind of the successor in that sense. So I think that's the type of player that the Flames are going to target. There's another guy that I think they could also go for that would fill this role as well, who I think has an even higher ceiling, but he's not as high on a lot of people's boards, so I was being a bit more conservative with him here, even though that guy's actually my number 1 defenseman this year, and we'll talk about him soon. With the 10th overall pick, we've got the Arizona Coyotes selecting Berkeley Catton. So Berkeley Catton is a guy who has had really good production, and in my viewings of him, it's been kind of a mixed bag. I haven't always been the biggest fan of him. I think he's a guy who's definitely going to be a good prospect. I think he's going to be very good. But I'm not convinced he's a top 10 guy. I think he will go top 10. I would be surprised if he doesn't with the hype that he's been getting and with the production he has. He's a guy who's definitely going to have to bulk up more. That's not really a concern that I have for him. I know he's going to be able to do that. Some people are convinced he's a center. He doesn't really play a lot of center right now. Why I felt like it was a good move for Arizona potentially is they're not really looking for a center. They're happy with Logan Cooley as their number one center of the future. I think that Berkeley Catton will just add skill on the wing in the top six. Personally, I don't think he's an amazing skater, but I think he's just kind of above average at everything you want him to be above average at. And then there's just not really an edge to the game. There's, the physicality's not there, which isn't a big deal, but to be for a guy who's supposed to be more of a complete player on top of the offense, that aspect isn't there. So that's just one criticism I have. Overall, I think he's a good player, and I think he will make the NHL and be very solid. And certainly I've been very wrong about players like this in the past because, I wasn't a big fan of Logan Cooley to begin with. Some of my concerns were very similar with him, where the flash was nice, but there was just not a lot of substance there, right? I think Catton's kind of that same way, but at the same time, I do think he will be quite good as long as he's utilized and developed the right way. Next, we have the Seattle Kraken, and I have them taking Zane Parekh, and Zane Parekh is my number one defenseman in this draft. And I know that sounds like a kind of an easy thing to do, a cop-out to pick the guy who's been producing the best offensively in all of the leagues right now, really. But I really am that high on him. I think he's a really smart player with the puck. I've actually been really impressed in some of my viewings with how he plays without the puck, how he is defensively. He's very good. He's very active with his stick and trying to win back pucks all the time. I think he's a smart defensive guy as well. And in the offensive zone, you'll rarely find a better prospect than him offensively as a defenseman. I mean, he has an unbelievable shot. He's going to score a lot of goals in the NHL like he has in the OHL. I mean, he's scoring at just an unprecedented rate for draft eligible defenseman, and his passing is really good. His skating is good. He's not like a fast skater, but he's a really crafty skater. So he's a guy who's deceptive when he goes into corners. He actually reminds me a fair bit of everything that I liked from Hunter Brustevich last year, but Parekh is a better defender than Brustevich is. And I think that Parekh is really the only guy in this draft that I see with having number one defenseman potential. But at the same time, I can see that there's definitely a risk with prospects who are this flashy and this skilled like him, that the game might not translate. I think it will, but I can see why some people are a bit more concerned and don't have him as high. But really, I don't have any issues with his game. I think that he's going to be a fantastic player. And for the fit for the Kraken, I mean, they're in a situation where they've drafted extremely well in their first few years. They've really got great prospects at every part of their lineup. I loved the Edward Chalet pick last year. David Goyette looks like he's going to be a great player for them. They obviously still have Shane Wright, who's developing in the AHL for them. They have great defenseman prospects as well. Guys like Ty Nelson, who I've always been a big fan of. There's Riker Evans, looks like he's going to be a solid player for them. They have some decent goalie prospects. I would say maybe that's the place that they could improve the most is their goaltending prospects. Obviously, Nicholas Coco looks like he's going to be decent. I'm not sold on that yet, but I'm also no goalie expert by any means. but I also wouldn't take a goalie this high. So really, it's a best player available situation, and that is absolutely Zane Parekh for me right now. And here's the other player that I was thinking about here for the Montreal Canadiens, potentially, is Michael Bronzek-Nygaard. He is a great, interesting prospect, I think. Great shooter, and really, he was worth watching all Norway's games at the World Juniors for, because even though, when he wasn't on the ice, maybe they were getting dominated a little bit, he played extremely well in that tournament, and, he had a lot of goals considering they certainly weren't considered front runners in that tournament by any means at all. But what I noticed from those viewings is he has a great shot, great release, wrist shot off the rush. He scored some pretty nice goals that way. Good offensive zone instincts. They got some pretty good possessions with him on the ice, and power plays looked good. He is also pretty feisty. Like, he was trying to, clearly he was upset, at the tournament that things weren't going a little bit better for them, but he was, starting some scrums, and I like that feistiness that he brings. With Nashville, really, they're in a situation too where I think it's kind of a best player available situation, because I really like a lot of the prospects they have at a few areas. Big fan of Joachim Kamel, who's still coming up for them. We could probably see him as early as the end of this season or starting into next season, depending on what their playoff race is looking like. And, some of their centers have been looking good. Potentially a center would be another area that they'd really like to target, but, I think it's something they could address in free agency as well. And then defensively, I like some of their prospects as well, and, it's a reasonably young area for their team right now. So, and then of course they've got, great goaltending depth to the point where they're thinking of trading Jussi Saros to get Askarov in sooner rather than later. So, Nashville's an interesting team right now for sure, and they definitely need to bank off of, having Forsberg still in his prime at this point, and maybe try and push the next couple of years, see if they can go on a run while he's still kind of the elite player that he is right now. Because, right now I would say aside from him, they don't really have that level of player or prospect. So hopefully they can kind of make a crafty move to kind of get themselves into contention status. With the next pick, I have the Washington Capitals selecting Tig Iginla. Now, potentially, and I don't know how Flames fans feel about this, but potentially, at 9, the Flames could consider a player like Tig Iginla, because that would be great to bring him back to Calgary. But I think top 10 is a little bit rich for him. I think he's a good complete player with a great shot. But I think, he's also a guy who will definitely take a bit of a longer development curve to get to the NHL. But he has really, exceeded expectations this year. He struggled a little bit in his first WHL season, but now he really does look like a solid NHL prospect. And I don't want to say that the name value is kind of increasing his stock, on its own. It's a recognizable name, but I think there is a little bit of that for sure. I think that, from the little bit of Kelowna that I've watched this year, because I watched them a lot more last year to see Andrew Crystal, I haven't been super wowed by Iginla, but I definitely like some of his traits for sure. And part of the reason why I liked this fit with the Capitals is because that is where Crystal ended up. And I think that they could definitely continue some of the chemistry that they've had in Kelowna going forward with the Capitals organization as well. I believe that they play together. I don't want to say that 100% because, again, I haven't watched a lot of Kelowna this year, and it's something that I intend to do more down the stretch because he definitely is an interesting and polarizing prospect that I kind of want to get a better sense of. But for now, I'm comfortable putting him here just from a prediction standpoint because he seems to be pretty high on most people's boards. For me, he's more kind of in the 20 to 30 range, but definitely I could see him jumping up here. Next up, with the 14th overall pick, we got the New York Islanders selecting Liam Greentree. I think he's a very Islanders style of player, the type of guy that they're looking for, kind of I don't want to say power forward because he's not huge, but he definitely does play that way a little bit. He's the best player on a very struggling Windsor team this year, and I like his talent a fair bit. He's a good shooter. I think he has a lot of room to growth as far as the hockey IQ aspect of his game goes. I've seen him make some decisions that I wasn't too fond of, but this seems to be kind of in the realm of where he's landing on people's lists, and obviously the production is very good, and you can't argue with that. Next up, we've got the Devils here, and finally, recently I was able to find some film on Igor Chernyshov, because until then he was a bit of a mystery to me, and what I can say about him is he is an energizer bunny out on the ice, just very fast, winning a lot of battles along boards, and also just a very smart player, good passer, good shooter as well. Like, overall, just a very good MHL level player. And a guy who's gotten, a solid number of games in the KHL this year as well. Obviously not getting a lot of ice time there, but he's getting that experience, which is really good. For the Devils, I really didn't know what to do with them because right now I really love the way that their defense is kind of stacking up. I would say their biggest need is in the net, but I think this would be too early for a goalie. I could see them, if this was where they were drafting, trying to trade back to the tail end of the first round, because there's a couple of goalies there, and you'll see I actually have 2 goalies going in the first round, which is very unprecedented for me. But there's 2 teams that I really feel that are in that kind of range that really nothing will help them as much as adding a goalie will right now. And so I did do that. I think if they were trading back and they were in that range, I think it would be more justifiable for them to take a goalie. And frankly, I would consider taking it here as well. I just don't think it's realistic, so that's why I don't have it here. And Chernyshov is a good player and somebody who can kind of fill in for some of the, they don't really have aging players in their core. But guys like Palat and Toffoli who might not be there for super long. Chernyshov is a guy who can kind of fill in on the wing in the middle or in the top 9. So definitely kind of in that situation, just a player that I like the fit. With the 16th overall pick, the San Jose Sharks, and the pick that they got from Pittsburgh in the Erik Karlsson deal, I have them selecting Carter Yakimchuk. Now, this one might be a little bit more of my bias showing here rather than what actually is likely to happen, because Carter Yakimchuk is kind of more closer to the tail end of the first round of most people's rankings. I like him here. I think he's a very complete player. His offense obviously speaks for itself, but he's a very physical right-handed defenseman as well. And it's been kind of a while since we've had a guy who really plays that physical two-way game. Not a lot of prospects come out that way these days. It's a lot of guys who play offensively or defensively, and sometimes the defensive guys have a bit of a physical game, but really there hasn't been a very physical defenseman prospect that has been highly touted for a while. That's what Yakimchuk is, absolutely. I mean, he throws beautiful open ice hits. He's going to pinch a bit and it's going to get him in trouble, and it's something that he's going to have to work on, but I've seen him do it well, and he is definitely a very interesting prospect, and very highly coveted right-handed defenseman as well. And San Jose is just kind of in a situation where I really don't like their defensive prospect pool right now. I don't think that they have a lot of guys there right now that are going to be there long term. I do like Henry Thrun. He's been, I think, solid for them despite the pretty poor season overall. But they just gotta start adding more talent there, and if they weren't second overall in this mock draft, I probably would have had them taking a defenseman with their first pick, because I think that's a big need, is like for sure is defense. But they really do need everything. They're really at the beginning of this rebuild, so it's kind of going to be about taking best player available. But at this pick, gotta address the defense for sure. And we got another defenseman coming off the board here, as we have the St. Louis Blues selecting Henry Muse. So Henry Muse is a good two-way guy, and his offense has really skyrocketed in the second half of the season. He started out a bit slower, but it's slowly gotten much better with the 67s this year. But I've always been a fan of his defensive game. He's a good skater, and really I think the Blues are just kind of in a situation where they're trying to start developing that next core of guys as their current core starts to age out and kind of slows down. I've been impressed with the Blues this year, the fact that they've gotten themselves into a playoff run, because I'm not a huge fan of the core that they currently have. I think that it leaves a lot to be desired, and I think that I liked their picks last year. Dvorsky was a great pick. Stenberg looks like he's going to be good too, and I really like them getting Lindstein as well. And part of what I was thinking in my head when making this selection for them was trying to find somebody who I thought was just going to be a really good future partner for Theo Lindstein, somebody with good skating, more offensive side to Lindstein's defensive side, and kind of and being the right-handed defenseman to Lindstein's left-handed defenseman. I'm pretty sure. I hope I'm not wrong on that. So Muse kind of fit that bill from the guys that were remaining, and I think that makes a lot of sense for them. Okay, so this one is the one where I went a little bit off the board, and there's a couple more like that, but not too many. So Bednarik I liked because I felt like he really fit the mold of what the Flyers are trying to do. I wanted to add a center for them because with them losing Cutter Gauthier, they don't really have a lot of young centers. Obviously, they still have Forster, they have Frost, and they have Noah Cates, who have been all solid players. I'm not convinced that all of those guys are long-term pieces or that they're going to be top six guys for sure. I like Bednarik. He provides a bit of playmaking, good hands and stuff. He's been a solid, I think, the second best player for the U.S. development team this year, and in my viewings of Yzerman, he's definitely stood out to me on quite a few plays. He is probably more likely, if he doesn't go here, I think he would probably fall to the second round. I weirdly feel like he's a kind of guy that the Flyers would kind of covet. He's got good size. He's definitely got the ability to be a two-way guy, more physical kind of thing. So I think when you're taking the Tortorella factor into play here, it kind of changes the way you would draft, because originally I was going to have them drafting Trevor Connolly, who's a very skilled winger, and he will go eventually on here, but I didn't like the fit there. I felt that his style of play kind of clashes with the way that Tortorella coaches his guys to be. So I just didn't think that made as much sense, and I felt that this was just a better fit. But it's not one that I feel great about. So if you guys have a better, if there's any Flyer fans that do watch this video, just let me know down below who you're hoping to draft, either somebody you hope falls to you or based on the way that the board has fallen in my video here, out of who's available, who you would be interested in bringing in. I could have gone defense here as well, but I do like the defense prospects that they have right now. Obviously, bringing in Drysdale is definitely interesting. They have Cam York, who should be there for a while, and I really liked their pick of Oliver Bonk last draft, and I think he's going to be really good for them as well. So I felt that defense didn't need as much of addressing at this moment in time. Next up, we got the Detroit Red Wings, and I have them selecting Beckett Senecki. Senecki is another guy that I could see falling to the second round or kind of the tail end of this round. I think he brings a bit more size and physicality. I expect him to bulk up a little bit. He's a fierce competitor, and I think that's something that Detroit is kind of lacking. They have a lot of the talent guys. They have a lot of the two-way skilled centermen and that kind of thing, and I really like the way that their defense is going to shape up once Edmonton kind of gets to that level. And Sandin Pellikka is potentially going to turn into a good player for them. Not a big fan of him, but a lot of people are high on Sandin Pellikka. For Beckett Senecki, I think he's going to provide a bit more edge that Detroit's been missing, and that they will kind of need going into playoff matchups as they become a playoff team over the next couple of years. Just kind of a player from that perspective for them. And here we go, the first goalie off the board. Am I crazy for this? I might be. But I could really see the Kings going in this direction because they have such a deep prospect pool. It's one of those things where adding another forward or another defenseman to their prospect pool just might not carry the same weight long term for them because they have so many, and they'll just be stuck behind so many players, barring some big move where they clear out their whole prospect pool for a trade for a big player or something. But and even potentially more crazy is what goalie is it that goes here, because I could really see it going a number of ways. They could go Carter George, who is the number 1 ranked North American goalie by NHL Central Scouting. I think Ryerson Leanders provides maybe just a bit more upside, although I like both of them pretty much equally. And then there's also Kim Saarinen, the Finnish goalie, who really it comes down to LA and their scouting staff and them going and watching these goalies and seeing which one they like the most, because I'd be surprised if LA walks away from this draft without a highly touted goalie prospect, just because even though Tam Calbot's been extremely good for them this year at times, he is an aging goalie. He's only on a 1-year deal. You don't really know what your future in the net is going to look like. Phoenix Copley obviously wasn't the answer. You do have a couple of interesting prospects. I think Eric Portillo is kind of the top guy there. They had Hunter Slakinski, I think is how it's said. They drafted last year as well, so it'll be interesting to kind of see his development. But I think if you want a more highly touted, highly rated goalie prospect, this is the way to do it. You just take the first guy off the board, and you make all the guys that think that he was going to be there in the second round panic, and I think it'll change the goalie market, which above just trying to be realistic here, I also want to see a little bit of chaos, and I think that would be a really interesting moment in the draft to see this guy go off the board. He's a great goalie. I'm not a goalie expert. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I understand how to predict how good a goalie is going to be. But Ryerson Leanders has been a really important part of the Mississauga Steelhead this year. I think he's a really interesting prospect, and finally Canada is starting to get some more strong goalie prospects going, because it's been quite a while since they've had this kind of pedigree of goalie prospect, and they have 2. And spoiler alert, I will have Carter George being drafted in the first round here as well. Okay, next up with the 21st overall pick, we have the Chicago Blackhawks taking the pick that they got from Tampa Bay in the Hagel trade. And I have them taking Aaron Kiviharju here. Now, he is really going to be... we're saying that right now. He's going to be the wild card of projections for the next little while, but he is supposed to return from his surgery soon. So for those of you who don't know, he's only played 7 games this year, and for those of you who were loosely following draft coverage around the start of the year, he was a guy who people were talking about in their top 10s, top 15s. 2 years ago, he was being penciled in as the first overall pick for this draft eventually. Obviously, it's been a rough go for him this year, having to miss so much time with, having to get surgery. It is, He's only played 7 games this year total. I think when he gets back, and it's going to be touch and go for a little bit, I'd imagine, coming back from a big surgery like that, and trying to get fit again. But I think the talent will still shine through, and I think that he will still be a first round pick. And I think that there's going to be a team out there that wants to gamble on the upside, and I think Chicago is one of the teams that can afford to do that. They obviously, with this being their second first round pick of this draft, and we'll see if they try to acquire more as time goes on and the deadline comes up. But I think Kiviharu, for them, I just really wanted to target another good puck-moving defenseman for them, because obviously I expect Korchinski to be quite good. Obviously, things are rough right now there. He's been thrown into a pretty difficult situation to be a rookie defenseman on a team like that. But just having more options for the long term, and I expect Kiviharu to bulk up as well. I don't expect him to come into the league at 165, 170 pounds. He'll be a larger guy once he gets to the league. Moving along, we're going to move on to the Toronto Maple Leafs and kind of talk about a similar situation with Adam Juracek, who obviously he's missed some time with injury this year as well. He was ranked to be potentially a top 10 player by some people. The thing about Juracek is there's not really much of an offensive side to his game, but the reason why I like this fit is because the Toronto Maple Leafs are really, I think they're really needing a really good defensive and strong right-handed defenseman. Now, right now he's not that. He is not a strong guy. For anyone who's seen his injury, it was on a fairly routine body check in the open ice, that just a bigger guy coming through him, as far as weight goes, a bigger guy. So he's going to need to bulk up, and I'm sure he knows that at this point. I'd be shocked if he's still sitting at 168 through that time that he had off from injury. I'm sure he's been working on bulking up, but that's just the latest stats that I can get on him for his size, and I'm sure he'll be playing at around the size that his brother is at. Obviously David Juracek is his brother. He has been talked about as a very smart defender, a very active player, and a guy who's just gotten a lot of really good pro experience already at his age. So it's one of those things where the Leafs kind of need a guy that's going to fill a role for them. They're not necessarily looking for elite talent here, and I don't think elite talent really exists at this point in the draft. But there is definitely a few directions they could look at. I don't think they should look at forwards at this point. I think they've really focused on forwards the last couple of years, obviously taking Easton Cowan. They have Fraser Minton. So really addressing what has been more or less the weakness of this team. Well, goaltending has been the weakness mainly this year. I don't think defense has been a huge issue for them, but I think Juracek, is a guy who has the potential to add a lot to that defensive core. Next up, we have the Carolina Hurricanes. I have them selecting Luke Misa. Basically, I wanted them to take the best center available. I do think they have a couple of decent centers in their prospect pool. Their prospect pool is probably my favorite in the NHL. I'm excited to see if they can get Alexander Nikishin to come over from Russia, because he looks like he's going to be a fantastic player. But I think that center is an area that they could address, because I think Kokniemi, for as good of a two-way guy as he is, he doesn't provide a whole lot of offense for them as a second-line center. And I'm not necessarily sure that Luke Misa can be that guy either, but at this point in the draft, he's kind of the most offensive center available left, aside from a few other guys who are a bit more obscure that I don't expect to be first-round picks. So I think Luke Misa definitely has the potential to be a second-line center for sure. He's obviously, he's the brother of Michael Misa, who many people expect to be the first overall pick in next year's draft. And he has a lot of talent. He's a great skater. He's definitely got offense to his game. He's been productive this year for sure for Mississauga. So definitely, but a guy that I'd like to watch a bit more, because at this point I don't have a great read on the type of player that he is. At this point, I believe he's kind of a playmaking center. Obviously, he'll have to bulk up more. Not a big issue. So yeah, that's Luke Misa. Moving on to the 24th overall pick, and this isn't the other one where I kind of went off the board a little bit here, and that's Dominic Badinka. The Oilers really need to improve the right-hand side of their defense. Obviously, they have Bouchard, who's great, but they're going to want to move on from Cody Ceci at some point. I like Dominic Badinka a lot. I think he provides a lot to them defensively. He's got a lot of good pro experience this year. I'll have to watch more of him, but I do believe he's got a good physical side to his game. He's a solid puck mover. Really, at this point in the draft, I think he's good value for the Oilers, and I wouldn't be surprised if, as time goes on, people kind of notice him and see him as a first-round talent. Next up, we've got the Vegas Golden Knights. Basically, for them, it's going to be best player available as well. Really, they have good prospects in all areas. And the best player is going to be Nikita Artemonov, who plays on the same team as Anton Salev in the KHL, and he's been getting a lot of action there. His production has also been pretty unprecedented for the KHL level for a draft-eligible player. The thing about him is he's not really a driver on his line from what I can see. Actually, looking at that picture, I'm not 100% sure that that's him, because that's not the number that he wears, at least not with the big club. Maybe that's his MHL number. I'm not 100% sure, but apologies if that is the wrong guy there. But anyways, he is, he's not really the driver on his line, but he is a good finisher. He does good things with the puck on his stick, but he doesn't really carry the puck a whole lot himself. But he's smart, and he gets the job done for what has been a pretty solid KHL team this year, as far as I can remember. He's definitely going to be a first-round pick. He could go much higher than this, honestly, because people are going to look at his production in the KHL and say, this being pretty unprecedented production for a KHL forward. At his age, definitely could increase his stock for sure. Next up, we've got the Philadelphia Flyers with their second pick of this draft, the one that they got from Florida in the Claude Giroux trade a couple of years ago. They get Tarek Paraskak with this pick, and he is a guy who kind of came out of the gate absolutely firing. Points-wise, he was leading the WHL for quite a while. He has slowed down a little bit since then. I think the thing with him, even though he's been producing so well, is you kind of have to look at his team and realize that he's playing with a lot of very talented guys, which shouldn't be a knock on him. Is just worth noting for context. He's going to be more of a finisher than a driver. He's getting a lot of his goals on deflections and just dirty goals in front of the net, which are all great. I mean, you want a guy who can score like that, and he can score in other ways too. But it's worth putting the points that he's getting into context like that. And I think he's definitely going to be a late first-round pick. He could be a early second-round pick as well. But I think he's a guy who definitely provides some value as a depth forward on whatever team he ends up landing on. All right, so we got Carter George here, the second goalie going in this draft, and I have him going to the Colorado Avalanche. Now, the Avalanche definitely have a few needs that they could address. They definitely need depth forwards. We've definitely seen through injuries and various other reasons that they've had to they've gotten a little bit short on players on the offensive end. I think that's something they can address in free agency. That's something they need to kind of address right away. When you look at goaltending, though, for them, it hasn't been great. Obviously, Georgiev was an all-star this year. He was voted in. It hasn't been an exceptional year from his perspective. Obviously, they're still winning games because their offense is so good. But goaltending is definitely an area that they could address. And obviously, when you're doing that through the draft, it's somebody that you're going to have to wait on for a little while. But Carter George is a great prospect. I think that it's something that kind of helps the Avalanche in the long run. Obviously, you're going to have Nathan McKinnon and Kel McCarr there for a long time. I might as well have a superstar goalie there with them as well. And I do think Carter George has the potential to be that. Obviously, again, I will say I am not a goaltending expert, so I'm not going to claim that I know that Carter George is going to be a superstar. But the way he is talked about and the way that he's playing, obviously we haven't had a lot of draft eligible goalies from the OHL recently play at the level that both Leanders and Carter George have played at. So, it definitely makes them exciting prospects, and I think the fit for Colorado there is good. All right, the 28th pick, we've got the Canadians picking Trevor Connolly, who I talked about previously, who's a very skill-based guy. He's a very good playmaker. He does score goals, but he's definitely more of a puck handling, deking, passing forward. And I think that with Montreal, again, they could potentially go defense with a pick like this, but really it's just going to be about adding as much talent as possible, because I think they'll get to a point when they kind of evaluate who they have in that prospect pool and start to look to make trades and stuff, and maybe he becomes that eventually because they're so deep in so many areas. But I do like Trevor Connolly a lot. I think that really 28 is kind of late for him. I think that he really should go in the top 20 or so. I just didn't find the right fit for him, and I think that that's going to be the thing with Trevor Connolly, is just finding where he fits, because he could slide just because his style of play isn't necessarily needed anywhere. Not that it's not an important style of play. It's a really good style of play, and he's a good player. But I think that addressing the fit for him was just kind of hard for me. Next up, we've got the 29th overall pick, the New York Rangers selecting Andrew Basha, I think. Basha, yeah. So he's a player that I've gotten to watch a decent amount alongside Caden Lindstrom and that very talented Medicine Hat team. And he's going to be a great player. I think offensively he's a good playmaker, and he has finishing touches too. And just the fit with the Rangers is just, I think, with the fact that Kaapo Kakko has proven that he isn't going to be a top six forward, you just got to find guys that can be, and Othman probably can be as well, but it's just good to have options there. That was just kind of my rationale with picking Basha for that pick. This one may be a bit of a reach. He might be more of a second round pick. Definitely a day two guy for a lot of people. But Luca Morelli, I think, is an interesting prospect. He's a good puck moving right-handed defenseman. And I think that's something that Dallas kind of needs a little bit. Obviously, they do have Nils Lundqvist, but he hasn't really turned out the way that they were expecting him to. Aside from that, the right-handed defenseman are Yanni Hakanpää, and I think Joel Hanley might be right-handed, or at least he plays on the right side. I think Heiskanen does as well, but adding another right-handed defenseman just kind of gives you the option to play Heiskanen on the left side. And they drafted Leon Bichel not too long ago, who I don't think his development is going super well, but I do still think he'll be a solid player eventually. He's got good size and physicality, and hopefully he can develop a pretty well-rounded game, because I think Luca Morelli could really complement him as a defensive partner, and that was kind of my thinking when choosing who to put for them. As far as right-handed defensemen go, for first round talk, a guy that I thought about putting here was EJ Emery, but I just haven't been impressed enough with him. Offensively, he just leaves so much to desire, and while he is good defensively, there just isn't enough for me there to consider EJ Emery a first-round talent like so many other people do, but I think he'll be a good developmental project for somebody in the second or third round. Next, we got the Ottawa Senators with their second pick of the draft, the one that they are getting from Boston through Detroit, from the Alex DeBrincat trade. Obviously, they're just getting whichever of the Boston or Detroit picks will be the later one, and very clearly looks like that'll be the Boston pick. and in this case they will be getting Maxime Massé from Chicoutimi. He is a player that I've really liked for a while, and somebody that I was hoping would be a little bit better this season, because I was watching him a good amount last season coming into this year, thinking he would potentially be a top 15 guy. Hasn't really been the case for him. His consistency early on was not super great, but he's really come back on later on in the season. He is a goal scorer for sure. He is a guy who will put pucks in the back of the net, and that's something he's been doing all season long, even dating back to last season as well. I think that he might fall here just because he needs to work on being a bit more of a complete player. Not a lot of people have him as a first-round grade player anymore, but personally I do think that he has that talent level, and I think he fulfills that right side need that the Ottawa Senators really want to fill going forward. Aside from that, I considered putting a kind of a big right-handed defenseman here, but I didn't like the talent level enough here, and I think that's something that they could get at in the second round for sure. Obviously, having a fairly early second round pick, that's something they could address fairly early. But I considered guys like Thomas Lavoie from Cape Breton and Adam Kleber from the USHL as potentially guys here, even though with most teams I don't think I would consider those guys to be first round guys. Just kind of trying to find the fit there, because the Sens don't exactly have the most size on their back end. And then the last pick of this first round and of this mock draft, we have the Calgary Flames selecting Emil Hemming. He's definitely a guy that I could see going a lot earlier than this. He was another guy that I was kind of struggling to find the fit for, but he's a guy who definitely has a lot of goal scoring upside and has been impressive at the Finnish Elite League level. So I definitely had to find a way to get him into the first round here, and I wasn't necessarily sure about the fit with the Flames, but I couldn't let this guy fall to the second round. He's just too good for that. Anyways, that will conclude my mock draft. So if you guys have any comments, anything you would change about it, certainly let me know down below. I want to know kind of who are the guys that you've been watching this year that you've been really enjoying, that you're really excited to see in the NHL someday. Like the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this.